But Matthew's got his SEC quarterback room rankings, so don't get hung up just on the starter, folks. But of course, the starter is first and foremost. So do you want to take these from the top? You're going to take these from the bottom and go up?
You know what? We'll take it from the top. Let's start out with, I think, the most intriguing battle, which is up top. Again, a starter matters the most. I think backup, I took into account when I thought they were even. And I think you can debate the top quarterback room in the SEC because I honestly think these are probably two of the top 3 to 4 guys in the country. I'll get called biased, blah, 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 blah. I went number 1 with Texas. I think with Quinn Ewers, there last year, 3,479 yards passing, 22 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. His quarterback rating, his QBR, was a little bit lower than I thought. It was 17th in the country at 78.3. His completion percentage was pretty damn good at 69% overall. I think there's obvious room for him to grow here, but I did go with Texas at 1. Could you debate Georgia at 1? Absolutely you could. But then if you are going to have the debate, and I'm going with quarterback room, Arch Manning is better than Gunnar Stockton at Georgia. I have yet to see Gunnar Stockton take, honestly, any snaps. I've seen Arch Manning take some snaps, and I thought he looked pretty good. Obviously, meaningless snaps versus Texas Tech. But overall, I think Texas has a better quarterback room than Georgia and a even starting quarterback. So I went with them with number 1. As I just mentioned, number 2, I am going to go with the Georgia Bulldogs. Carson Beck had a really good year last year. When we talk about QBR, he was actually 5th in the country with an 86 QBR overall and a 72.4% completion percentage. So he was slightly better in those areas than Quinn Ewers. I thought, though, when you look at, like, they did have one similar matchup. You saw Carson Beck go against Alabama and Quinn go against Alabama. Quinn Ewers had the better game. It's really not close. Carson Beck, that was probably his biggest struggle last year, was versus Alabama, maybe versus Auburn. But I went with Georgia at number 2. You could argue now that maybe, I don't know if they're going to have Jaden Rashada as their backup quarterback. That will be interesting, but he's hard to read. He's transferred multiple times. I don't know how good he is. Mark, will be interesting, and I'm sure you'll make a video in the future about multiple transfers, especially 5-stars, and like what is the hit rate when they're on their 3rd school. It's probably not very high. But yeah, I went with Georgia number 2. Now, I think that's the tier 1. I think you can debate between those two teams. I think there's a little drop off here, and then there's like 4 or 5 schools that you can debate for this 3rd spot. I went with Alabama 3. You can definitely debate this. But I think Jalen Milroe is going to have a very good season under a very pro offensive coach in Kalen DeBoer. He was actually surprisingly high in QBR last year. He was 13th. He was actually ahead of Quinn Ewers. I was kind of surprised by that. But what stands out with him, obviously, 531 yards rushing last year and 12 rushing touchdowns, on top of the 23 touchdowns passing. So 35 total touchdowns. That's a very good year for Jalen Milroe in his first year as a starting quarterback. And let's be honest here, they did not call plays to his strength until, I would say, 4th or 5th game of the year. And then even then they were spotty with it. So I think overall, Jalen Milroe is going to take a jump up. And this is where, and now if he doesn't, I could be wrong, because there's been reports of Austin Mack, who transferred from Washington, having a good spring. And if he's the starter, I would drop them a little bit lower, but I still think he's pretty good as well as their backup. I think Ty Simpson is going to be the 3rd string quarterback. I think Austin Mack came to Washington to back up Jalen Milroe and possibly take over the starting job if need be. Number 4, again, you could debate for the 3rd spot, Jackson Dart in Ole Miss. 364 yards passing for him, 23 touchdowns and 5 interceptions, a 78.5 QBR, so a high QBR for him as well, 65.1% completion percentage. And coming into the season, I mean, Ole Miss is one of those teams that I think killed the transfer portal. I expect them to have a good year. Lane Kiffin is always good with his quarterbacks. So I think this is a fair ranking for Jackson Dart. I think at his peak, he could probably creep up to number 2 if Quinn Ewers or Carson Beck has a down year or a bad year. I don't see him ever being the number 1 starting quarterback in the SEC. And in fact, I think the SEC, like looking at this as I keep going down this list and as we go through this is a really good year quarterback-wise for the SEC. I really like this group of players they have. Number 5, this is where it gets really hard for me. LSU. I like Garrett Nussmeier. There's not many stats. I didn't even write them down because they weren't noteworthy to me. He didn't get enough starts to even mention them, but I like Garrett Nussmeier. I like what they do with this LSU offense. Yes, is he replacing a Heisman winner in Jaden Daniels? Yes, but I do think he can put up similar production in the passing game. Obviously, he's not going to put up the rushing yards. He's not that type of quarterback. He is a pocket passing quarterback, and I think he's going to have a good year. But obviously, you can debate. Again, in this group, I still think we're in this group. And number 6, I'm going to go with Missouri and Brady Cook. He had 3,317 yards passing last year, 21 touchdowns and 6 interceptions. He was 18th in the country in QBR. A really good year for him, and he's returning. This is another big part of it, the weapons you have, and he has really good weapons. You return Theo Weiss, who had a great year. You return what is arguably the number 1 wide receiver in the country in Luther Burden. You do lose the running back that they had last year, but I think they'll be able to replace that. I think their defense, now I'm just getting at Missouri talk, but I think Missouri is just in general going to be a good football team, and I think Brady Cook is going to have another good year. You could debate this. I think you could put him up as high as 3, which I have Jalen Milroe. But we'll see. This is where I do think you're going to jump into the 3rd tier. I think 3 through 6 is where you can debate. Put them in any order you want. I have, and this is the 3rd tier for me. I have Florida. Could I have put Florida a little bit lower? Yes, but I think Graham Mertz had a spectacular year last year, and I expect him to have another pretty good year. It was weird, and it was probably weird for you, Mark, because he was not that good at Wisconsin. He wasn't. But to be honest with you, he's probably their 2nd or 3rd best player on offense, obviously behind Ricky Pearsall, who was their best, in my opinion. And Graham Mertz had a 73 or 72.9% completion percentage, 20 touchdowns and 3 interceptions. He kept the ball, didn't turn it over. He was very good at that. And then this is where you do kind of have to put in the backup, because DJ Lagway was, I believe, the number 1 high school quarterback coming out last year. So very good backup quarterback if they do decide to go that route. That's the only reason I really have them over my 8 team in Tennessee with Nico Imalivia. And I think he's going to have a good year. I just haven't seen enough. I saw him versus a good Iowa defense, and I thought he was pretty good. But can he repeat that on a week in and week out basis in a tough SEC? Possibly. I think, like I said, the highest I think I could put him on this list is 7. And that's why I think this is the 3rd tier. Number 9, I'm still going to consider this as 3rd tier, but maybe I shouldn't. Oklahoma with Jackson Arnold. A lot of talent. A high 5-star recruit. He can definitely climb up this list with a really good season. He's very mobile, pretty accurate from what I've seen. Arm strength is pretty good. I don't think it's great or elite, but I'm going to have number 9, Oklahoma, and Jackson Arnold, like I said, a 5-star coming out. And number 10, this is a guy that just cannot stay healthy. Connor Wegman. Connor Wegman, I think, has a lot of talent. I believe he was a 5-star as well. 979 yards in 5 games last year, 68.9% completion percentage, 8 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, and an 87.2 QBR. That would be better than any quarterback I've named so far and out of this list. So that's pretty crazy. His issue is health. If he can stay healthy, I think he can be a very good quarterback. But again, the number 1 criteria is availability, and he's just not healthy. Number 11, this is kind of where we get into the unknown here. Kentucky with Brock Vandergrift doesn't have much to go on here. I know he's highly rated coming out of high school. Georgia kind of for a while was stacking these type of quarterbacks, and he makes the transition to Kentucky. We'll see what he can do. I don't expect a lot. Like, Will Levis obviously got drafted high in the NFL draft, but really didn't show much at Kentucky. He was one of those head scratches to me at why people were drafting him or mocking him so high. He's exceeded my expectations so far with the Tennessee Titans. I don't really expect Brock Vandergrift in this offense to do much more than what Will Levis did. So that's why I have him ranked 11th. Could he possibly move up a couple spots? I could see that. I don't see him being ranked any higher than 8 on this list. And then this is where it drops off quite a bit after this. Number 12, I have Auburn and Peyton Thorne. It's basically putting a lipstick on the pig with the last 4 guys here, honestly. So I went with Peyton Thorne, 1,755 yards passing, 16 touchdowns, 10 interceptions, 61.1% completion rate. I have him so high because I believe in Hugh Freeze. I think Hugh Freeze is a very good offensive coach. I think he realizes what the strengths and weaknesses of Peyton Thorne are, and I think he's going to get the most out of Peyton Thorne that anyone possibly could, honestly, because I don't think Peyton Thorne's that good. Number 13 is Mississippi State's Blake Shapen in their quarterback room. Again, another guy that struggles with health. 8 games, 61.7% completion percentage last year at Baylor, 13 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. If this guy can stay healthy in a Jeff Lebby offense, I do think he can perform pretty well. I don't really see him getting any higher than 11th on this list, but I think he can do okay, especially for Mississippi State and Jeff Lebby in his first year. And then number 14, I have Arkansas with Taylon Green, the Boise State transfer. Man, the passing stats are pretty ugly. 57.1% completion percentage, 11 touchdowns, 9 interceptions, 46 in the country QBR. His strength is rushing the ball, 436 yards rushing, 9 touchdowns. So I have him 14th. Number 15, a guy that was just named the starting quarterback, I believe, like this past week, Lenora Sellers at South Carolina. Basically nothing to go on other than he was a 4-star coming out of high school. And I don't know what to expect out of this guy. And then number 16, I have Vanderbilt. I actually think I may have underranked them. They could probably be 14th, maybe even 13th on the list. Diego Pavia from New Mexico State. My only issue with him is he's jumping from Conference USA to the SEC. I think that's a gigantic leap for somebody. But 26 touchdowns, 9 interceptions, 62.9 QBR, 60.4% completion percentage. I think he's pretty good. I just haven't seen him versus the SEC. I think I probably could have bumped him up. I probably could have bumped him up to 14th and then had Arkansas 15th and South Carolina 16th, but it was hard for me to decide. But that is my list, Mark. If anyone wants to debate on any of those, I think, like I said, I think there are definite tiers here and teams you can bump up or down, but I think I got the tiers right for the most part.
Well, I'm not necessarily going to debate. I will fill in with some of my thoughts here. So we'll take it from the top. I didn't prepare for this. So this is my bad. Matthew let us know that we're going to talk quarterbacks this week, and I totally forgot. So anyway, I'm familiar with all these people. I've watched all these people play, except for the Vanderbilt quarterback from, where's he from?
New Mexico State.
New Mexico State. Never seen him. Well, if I've seen him play, it was in their bowl game last year. New Mexico State, their one significant note of last season, they were the only team in college football to not reach the national championship game that played 15 games. Why they played 15 games, I don't know. They just like playing football, I guess. So they played 15 games. They went 10-5, kind of like Hawaii did a number of times where they played 15 games, even though they did not make a playoff or anything like that. So
hey, they also got paid a decent amount to beat Auburn in the second to last week of the season.
They did that. And they had Jerry Killett as their head coach, who did a heck of a job, but then he had health problems again. So he had to quit, and he went off on. So more things are coming to mind with New Mexico State. Before their bowl game, he went off on the facility there at the bowl site. And I don't remember exactly what was involved there, but I watched it.
They were playing at New Mexico's bowl site, weren't they? Like the University of New Mexico, and their rivals. So they treated them like crap the whole time while they were there. Yeah.
Yeah, he went off on that. It was pretty good. And then he resigned right after the game. All right, so Texas, we'll get back to the top of the list here. And the difficulty with the quarterback situation in evaluating the rooms and ranking the rooms is that if the starter does not get hurt, then it doesn't matter how good the room is. It does not matter. But suddenly, if the quarterback starter gets hurt, then it matters how good the backup is. So it's unlike any other position. Yeah, I'm going to go with, I don't know how many starting quarterbacks are lost during a season, but certainly I would think the majority of teams need a backup at some point to play meaningful snaps. So the odds are that you need the backup. And based on everything I know at this point, similar to you, I'll take Arch Manning over Gunnar Stockton. Now, in terms of starters, Quinn Ewers, Carson Beck. That's a tough call. I think they're extremely comparable in terms of production. And I've seen them both play quite a bit of football. I can make a noticeable distinction between Quinn Ewers' arm talent. For as good as Carson Beck is, I think Quinn Ewers has just got a higher ceiling with more talent than Carson Beck does. So Texas, Georgia, pretty similar thoughts there. Yeah, Jalen Milroe, once Alabama figured it out, and certainly people were talking about Alabama's demise after they played Texas and then South Florida, and Jalen Milroe was horrible, and Alabama was going to lose 4 games and all of that. Certainly reminded people that they've been through that before, and they figured out how to use Jalen Milroe. Now he gets paired with a passing coach, who so as long as Kalen DeBoer, and I believe he's got a grasp on this, knows how he needs to coach and how he needs to play call, could certainly do wonders with Jalen Milroe's passing skills potentially. Ole Miss and Jackson Dart, I'm good with that. You've got some faith in Garrett Nussmeier. I don't think that that's necessarily crazy, but you do have him placed ahead of 3 guys that have significant experience in big-time college football with Brady Cook, Graham Mertz, and Peyton Thorne. Yeah, I'm good with Garrett Nussmeier there. He did play the bowl game against Wisconsin, and he played extremely well. Threw 4 or 5 touchdown passes, put up 35 points. A really good performance against a decent Badger defense. Mizzou and Brady Cook, I'm good with that. Yeah, they lose their top rusher, Cody Schrader, one of the best in the nation, but I think they'll be fine. He's got his number 1 weapon, Luther Burden, back. I try not to do these rankings based on what I think the numbers are going to be, based on offensive line and weapons. I tried to do it more on how good I think the player is. So I'm going to have one guy elevated here. I don't know how much further than you, but I've got a bit of a different take on one of these guys. Brady Cook, nothing about his game necessarily jumped off the page at me or jumped off the screen the number of times that I saw him last year. And that's not a knock. That's also a positive that 21 touchdowns, 6 picks, didn't make mistakes. Obviously, Missouri had a nice season at 11-2. Yeah, Graham Mertz, I believe, spent his entire season or his entire career in the high 50s percentile at Wisconsin. And I don't know if he finished off the season with Florida, but at one point late in the season, he was on pace to set the all-time SEC completion percentage record. I thought he had a great season too. I don't know what else he could have done. What's interesting about their situation with how tough the schedule is and that they've got an heir apparent, and Graham Mertz is, I don't think, going to be a great quarterback, but certainly took steps in the right direction last year, is that if this was a coach who was comfortable with his coaching situation, his job security, when they get off to a 2-3 start, he may, in another situation, go to DJ Lagway and start to play for his future. But Billy Napier is going to want to win as many games as possible to hopefully keep his job.
Yeah, and so I actually heard like an interesting thing, and I wanted to get your opinion on this. So college and NFL have always been separated because there's never been like a free agency thing. Now there is, and what you'll see in the NFL is they always play the younger guy because then they pitch, look what we have. Let me develop this guy. Let me put the pieces around him. You could kind of do that with DJ Lagway at Florida where, hey, this guy's actually pretty good. I'm pretty good with quarterbacks. If you let me get the pieces, because we're Florida, we can get the pieces. We can put this around him. We can be good again. Is that not a realistic scenario in college still?
I think it's a realistic scenario for us to sit here and talk about and for football-minded people to talk about, but I don't know if you can convince an administration that you're going 4-8 and you're posting a 3rd consecutive losing season but you've got this promising quarterback, and trying to sell them that you're the only guy who can coach him and develop him. I don't know that that's going to roll.
That's fair.
But I think it's valid to a certain extent, but I just don't know if you're going to convince college administrators that. So Mertz at 7, I'm fine with that. I'm not going to re-rank these. Not that I would rank them exactly the same, but I don't see anything egregious here by any stretch. You obviously have to take, so you can either take the conservative approach, everyone, when you rank quarterbacks that you don't know about and say, okay, we're going to put them at the back of the line, or you can say, I'm going to make a projection. I ranked Bryce Young a couple of years ago as the second best quarterback in the country going into the season, and he had like 6 pass attempts.
Yeah.
And people ripped me to shreds saying, how can you do that? Well, by the end of the year, he
was the best quarterback in the country.
Won the Heisman Trophy. So I just took a shot. I basically thought, okay, every time Nick Saban has had a quarterback competition, when he's had inexperienced quarterbacks, whether that was Jake Coker against Blake Sims or whoever it was, whoever, I can't think of the quarterback that got the starting nod over Jalen Hurts going into 2016. Anyway, he went to Arizona
USC.
State.
Oh, yeah, okay, yeah.
But so this was the only time I could remember where Nick Saban had a completely inexperienced quarterback, and he's still, even before spring practice, said Bryce Young's the starting quarterback. So if he sold Nick Saban that early, then he had sold me. So I said Bryce Young, number 2 quarterback in the country that particular year. So I take my shot. So here you go with Nico. And I'm going to have to phonetically go back and try to pronounce his name because I don't remember how to do it. Ia Maliavea. I think that's what it is.
I've done it like 4 different ways.
Ia Maliavea. I think that's it. Anyway, so he played well against Iowa. I don't necessarily recall much of that game. That was really his coming out party against a good defense. And he played well. And he's got all the tools. And if he's the starting quarterback for Josh Heupel, then I got to think he's going to produce numbers. Oklahoma, Jackson Arnold threw some costly picks in their bowl game against Arizona, but threw for a ton of yardage. But he did throw, he kind of threw the game away. But young player, of course, and taking over for Dylan Gabriel at that point. Yeah, he makes some comments there about Connor Weigman and his availability. I was impressed with him. I saw him against Miami last year, and he had to throw the ball like 53 times, and he was under siege the whole game, had no running game, and did not win the game, but he did everything he possibly could. 8 touchdowns, 2 picks. We've got Kentucky, and so we've got the former Georgia quarterback. I just drew a blank.
Brock Vandagriff.
Yes, that Georgia room finally got broken up. So Brock Vandagriff, goes to Kentucky. I assume he's going to do well. He's a good player. He's obviously got a ton of talent, but we've not seen him play.
That's why I kind of grouped like 8 through 11. If you notice, they're talented guys, but I don't really know what to expect from them because they don't have that many starts under their belt.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I am right there with you. Now,
but then I have 12 through 16 there because they're just bad and when I've seen them, so they don't need to be any higher.
Well, this is where I'm going to disagree with you to a certain extent. I'm going to stick up for Peyton Thorne a little bit here. Okay. So if you go back a few years with Michigan State, I know he threw like 27 touchdown passes.
Yeah, I noticed that 27 touchdowns, like 7 interceptions. I think his second year
conference and a good schedule. That might have been, was that the year they had Kenny Walker and went 11-2?
I think it was because it was. So he's at Auburn. Then his last year at Michigan State, which was 2 years ago, he was not good. And then it was the year before. So yeah, I think Kenneth Walker was there.
Yeah, so I'm not selling Peyton Thorne as a top half of the league quarterback by any stretch, but I do think that he's capable. I don't know what happened to him last year. I know that they were just atrocious throwing the football, regardless of who they put in there. and he was the main guy. So Hugh Freeze is supposed to be an offensive guy and he didn't go out and get anyone. So they still have Peyton Thorne as their starting quarterback after a miserable. They were bottom 5 to 10 in the nation in pass offense. Mississippi State, who'd they go get?
Blake Shapen.
Oh, yeah. The Baylor quarterback. I've seen him play. Nothing special. Runs around. He's a gamer. He's a baller. He's a tough kid. Arkansas. So Talon Green. See, I would put Peyton Thorne. Well, you've got Peyton Thorne in front of these guys as well. So yeah. I don't necessarily. I wouldn't elevate Peyton Thorne much higher, if at all, any higher than what you've got. I might just have a slightly different take on his competency. But Talon Green, he won the Mountain West Conference. You can say that for him. But the numbers are not favorable. And then I know nothing about the South Carolina quarterback coming in from FCS play. Was that it?
Yeah, Lenora Sellers. I just know he's a big dude with those goggles like Kareem Abdul-Jabbar wore. That's basically all I know about
I haven't seen him.
Yeah.
And then I've heard the name, but then we've got the Vanderbilt quarterback. Who did they go get?
Diego Pavia.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, they just lost Michael Wright was their starting quarterback a couple seasons ago, and actually he's transferred a couple times. He just transferred again yesterday and went to Northwestern, where he's going to fight out for the starting job. So got no issues with quarterback ranking.